There is a purge of GOP rhinos in Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking about that and much more with Senator Douglas Mastriano. In just a moment, we'll bring him on. But before we do that, I just want to remind you, share this video out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. We need to make sure people are getting the truth into their lives. Also, head over to ourwatch.com, subscribe there, become a watchman. Love to have you a part of our group, making sure that you get up-to-date, good, solid, truthful information in your hands. Arm you as a citizen with the truth so that way you can get out and be effective. So thank you for being with us. All right, so like I said, we're going to be talking about several things today. Joining us on the program is Senator Douglas Mastriano. Senator Mastriano, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. A lot of things going on in the world. We want to talk about the purge of the GOP rhinos in Pennsylvania. We want to talk about something called the lemon test and some other things. But let's just start with the purge of the GOP rhinos in Pennsylvania. What's going on?
Well, you know, I've been involved in government here since 2019 after I retired from the Army. And I've watched the Pennsylvania Senate have more conservative leadership. The leadership is coming from the southwestern part of the state, so outside of Pittsburgh, which incidentally, only recently, the past decade, turned Republican. Used to be a heavy Rust Belt Democrat area, hard working class, traditional Democrats. And the party has gone so far radical that vast chunks of the state have become Republican. We have 67 counties, and about 60 of those counties are reliably Republican. I mean, it's just incredible. Obviously the cities are the strongholds for the Democrats. But as far as, the rhino, after the outcome of last year's gubernatorial race for me here in Pennsylvania, we focused locally in my district. And we've watched in my own county here that reliable conservatives, are winning races that they're ousting 2-decade-long rhinos, people that were literally working for Democrats, put an R behind their name, and were getting elected to office. Our own DA in this Franklin County, a conservative heartbeat of Pennsylvania, was a BLM advocate and what have you, and a harsh critic of Donald Trump. And so we're seeing the people slowly rise up. I think the wake-up call was 2020 when the shutdown had happened. It was heavy in many states. It was very draconian in Pennsylvania. And we had this movement rise up, which I was part of, called the Walk as Free People movement, based off of John 8:36. If Jesus set you free, you're free indeed. And people wanted their lives back. And so I'm asking people, there'll be setbacks along the way. Last year we had one of those setbacks. We have to stay the course. So, grow not weary in doing good, because in due time we'll reap the harvest if we don't faint. So it's going to take a while. It took a while to put this country and state in the bad condition that it is. It's going to take us a few years to get it back.
Yeah, but you're doing the work to get it back, and that's what matters. I mean, getting off the couch and actually be a part of the solution. So many people are complaining about the situation, but they're not actually getting up and doing something about it. And we're living in a time where people can no longer sit on the couch. If we're going to hang on to what we have here in America, we're going to have to get active. Talk to me, if you would, about some of the local action going on there in Pennsylvania.
Well, so I'm real hesitant to go negative in politics. That's just how I am. I want to talk about my message, and we hear that. But there is a time and place for all things. And for instance, in one of the local races, my team was badgering me, literally. You got to go negative. You got to expose this guy as the rhino he is. And I said, no, we're going to win on message. And I come home, Tim, and I get this flyer from this ultra left-wing packet from Washington, D.C., involved in a local race in Chambersburg, telling us that this rhino is a reliable conservative. And they did that apparently in about a dozen counties around Pennsylvania, because they know 2024 is hinged on local government, the outcome in Pennsylvania. And when I saw that, I'm like, we're taking him out politically, because this is hypocrisy backed and bolstered by about $50,000 or so of Democrat dark money backing up his campaign, trying to keep this rhino in office. And so I think there's two things. One thing that you just mentioned here is, first off, we got to do something about it. For people that say they love their country, but Doug, I'm not going to vote. My vote doesn't count. So you really don't love your country, because the least you can do as a citizen, as somebody who says they're a patriot, is to vote. That's the least you could do. Just spend a few minutes in line. Usually there's not a lot of people there voting, unfortunately. And part two is, figure out what can you do. I mean, not everyone can run for office, and maybe back that candidate, volunteer your time or donate to his or her campaign, but do something positive.
Right. Talk to me, if you would. I mentioned this at the beginning of the program, the lemon test. What is that, and why is that important?
So I think it's about 3 decades or so that the Supreme Court came up with this ruling that it was about the Establishment Clause. It had to do as the basis of exclusion of religion from state and federal government. And so it was a case brought up by somebody named Lemon, and it was used as a yardstick here to basically as the pretense to exclude people exercising or talking about their faith, and because it was a violation of the so-called establishment. And that's the first in the Bill of Rights. The government shall not have anything to do with the establishment. Basically of religion, completely out of context. The whole purpose of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, was to protect the religion from government, not government from religion. And so the Supreme Court recently, just a couple of years ago, struck down the Lemon test as being not constitutional, which means, okay, so now you had this potential chaos, and we see this in Oklahoma and elsewhere, where people put a cross or 10 commandments on public property, and then the Satanists come in with, their idol. But this revision to the establishment ruling on the Lemon is that actually would exclude that, because basically it says if this practice, the 10 Commandments, is something to do from the founding fathers, if it has a basis in American history, a public basis that people can, celebrate Christmas and sing Christmas carols, not just the secular songs about snowmen and reindeer, because there's a tradition behind it. And so now we're at a phase, because of the Supreme Court ruling, where people need to bring lawsuits forward so that they can awaken the local or district courts to the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot exclude traditional religious beliefs or conduct from the public sector or public life.
So you're saying people need to bring lawsuits forward, and there are many people that are doing that right now, aren't there?
Yes. Yeah. So, obviously, my wife and I attended David Barton's wall builder conference for legislators about a month ago, and he had an attorney there explaining it to us. And so there's actually law firms that will help walk you through that if a local government or a school district is still relying upon this fabricated ruling called the Lemon test. First off, they'll educate them with a letter, with the legal case on how religious practices cannot be excluded from the public sector if they're tied to American history. And then after that, if they refuse to budge, because a lot of solicitors that are paid by local government are risk adverse, they oh no, and then you have to take a lawsuit there forward to educate and inform the local government that no, they're in violation actually of the Supreme Court ruling on that.
We're talking about stuff happening here in America. Of course, we want to hang on to the freedoms we have here in America. We got to be active, especially on a local level. And you're talking about the purge of the GOP rhinos in Pennsylvania. But then, the average American hears what's happening in Israel, and many might think, well, what does that have to do with us here in America? Can you speak to us about what's happening in Israel right now and why it's so important to be aware of the situation?
Well, I mean, Christians were told to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, first off, in the Psalms of David. And so, God's eye is upon Israel and Jerusalem and his people out there. There's promises that were made thousands of years ago through the, Abraham covenant. But okay, what's the so what for America and Americans? Let's just take Iran for its word. Iran says that America is the great Satan, and the Iranian leaders, Khomeini and others, have said we're taking out Israel first, and after that, America. I mean, if these people believe it, it's just not rhetoric. I've watched this Iranian propaganda video that shows the Iranian army, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all these other, Islamic Jihad and others surrounding Jerusalem, in their military uniforms. This is deadly serious for them. And so let's just take it to practicality, recent history. When ISIS was on the winning side, when Obama called them the JV team, and ISIS was overrunning ancient peoples in Syria and Iraq, exterminating Assyrian Christians, Chaldean Christians, and other local inhabitants. It emboldened, these radicals around the world. We saw, people being recruited from England and elsewhere, young girls running off and marrying these ISIS warriors. I mean, so if Hamas wins, if Israel loses in any capacity, you'll find it at our doorstep. And so it's just not another war. This is a class of cultures, as one famous writer would have it, and Israel has to win. Look, it's ironic, we was fresh on our lips, never again. I was living in Germany in the United States Army during the Cold War in 1988 on the 50th anniversary of Kristallnacht, when really the Nazis made public their hate and persecution of Jews. And I remember all the remorse, and the Germans were running around, commemorating where the synagogues used to stand before they were burned down on the night of broken glass, and putting foundation stones out, and this will never happen again. And that then fast forward, to this year, and we're seeing, thousands showing up in New York City and Philadelphia celebrating the brutality and butchery of Hamas. I mean, it's right and wrong. It's good and evil. And then they equal out. Well, Israel bombing, no one told us after 9/11, don't bomb Afghanistan, because you have no moral cause to. What happened to Israel was the worst tragedy for the people of Israel since the Nazis. It was that bad. I mean, the heart. I have to stop reading what happened to women and children. It's that brutal. So this is a just war, and they need to win.
Yeah, I believe biblically they're going to win ultimately because God said so. We've got people from the Israeli government saying things like, read Isaiah 17:1, we're about to do it. Isaiah 17:1 talks about the destruction of Damascus. We know that Iran's funneling stuff through Damascus, and these things are very, very real. Not only that, but we have an open border where we've got people flooding in. These are military-age men flooding into our nation, and now we've got an FBI director saying that the likelihood of some sort of attack here on our own soil has increased. So, again, the people in America who say, what does that have to do with us, really need to pay attention to what's going on there in Israel. And, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that as far as the open border and this military-age men coming into our country?
We're in a dangerous place. I mean, anyone that's going to have an open border like we do, and obviously not have a clue who's coming across. And there's many reports of, wanted, suspected, or otherwise terrorists coming across the border. If that doesn't convince you because there hasn't been an attack yet, then let's talk about the 100,000 dead people from fentanyl. This inverted Chinese war, the opium wars of the 1800s. Now China has a long memory. Now they're waging a sort of opium war in the form of fentanyl against the West and the United States, and 100,000 dead, annually of fentanyl poisoning, mostly coming over the southern border. And that's because we don't have control of our nation's borders. And this is just not a Democrat problem. This is a Republican problem. After 9/11, Tim, I was sure that President Bush the younger would come out on 9/12 and say, we have a near and present danger at our doorstep. We're going to shut down the borders. We're going to mobilize our military. And none of that happened. He came out and said, go shop, keep our economy going, go shop. And because of this, this opportunity for the Democrat Party, I don't know what they're thinking here, but to flood our country with millions upon millions of people. And what's happening to women and children on our own border is reprehensible. I mean, it's even some of these young ladies that have been abducted as somebody's wife or daughter, but kidnapped, used as a sex slave. It's even happening in my district here in these small towns in Pennsylvania. We got a major problem and tragedy on our hands here, and it needs to stop. The border needs to be controlled. If we're going to go to war anywhere, if we're going to secure borders in Ukraine and what have you, number one should be America. We need to take care of our own country first.
Amen to that. Senator Mastriano, you've got your finger on the pulse of a lot of things that are going on. How can my audience follow you?
So on social media, I obviously have my Senator Mastriano page on Facebook and Twitter and all the other pages. Or my campaign side where I could speak more freely, obviously, is Doug Mastriano Fighting for Freedom. It's easy to find me.
All right. Well, Senator Mastriano, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your insight into everything that is going on. Also want to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, just share this video out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Get the truth into their hands. Also, go over to ourwatch.com, subscribe, become one of our watchmen. Love to get good content out to you on the regular. So God bless you. We'll see you next time right here on Our Watch with Tim Thompson.